As always, you're going to look and listen very carefully.
Look and listen.
The witch will fly over the graveyard tomorrow. Magicians always carry a wand. Yesterday, the elves finished making the necklaces. Harriet sometimes reads Robin Hood.
Read and repeat.
Well, let's review comparative and superlative adverbs. Have a look. A witch will fly closer to a giant than a fairy will. A giant walks faster than a dwarf does. Witches fly the fastest in the sky. And dwarves work the hardest when they are outside. Comparative adverbs compare two actions. In the first sentence, closer is a comparative adverb. It compares the actions of a witch and a fairy. In the second sentence, faster is a comparative adverb. It compares the actions of a giant and a dwarf. Now, superlative adverbs occur in comparisons of three or more things. Now, in the third sentence, fastest is a superlative adverb. It compares witches to all the other things on earth. And in the fourth sentence, hardest is a superlative adverb. It describes one situation, dwarves working outside, to all other situations. Now, another type of adverb is called a mid-sentence adverb. Have a look at these sentences. The fairy probably won't go to the forest. Merlin the magician already made the magic carpet appear. In the first sentence, probably is an adverb. And in the second sentence, already is an adverb. There are also adverbs of sequence, and we use these to describe a process. They usually come at the beginning of a sentence, and they're usually followed with a comma. So have a look at these examples. First, the witch got on her broom. Then, she shouted at the black cat. Next, she screamed at the sky. Finally, she flew away on her broom. So in these sentences, first, next, then, and finally are adverbs of sequence. Well, let's practice. Let's review the last of these adverbs. Rosa, what would you do if you saw a witch?
First, I would scream. After that, I would run. Finally, I will die.
Well, I hope you never see a witch, Rosa. And Lewis, what would you do if you met a wizard?
I met a wizard. You should know him, but I live closer to this man than you do.
Really? I'm not sure if I believe you. Okay, and Monica, what would you do if you saw a genie?
I would ask him for 3 wishes. I would be rich.
Okay, great everyone. Now, first you're going to look and then you're going to listen.
Look and listen.
A fairy flies more frequently than a witch. The moat was just filled with water. Gonk the giant walks the most carelessly of anyone. The drawbridge was finally closed.
Read and repeat. Adverb clauses.
Well, our review of adverbs is finished, so let's begin our lesson on adverb clauses. First, it's important to remember what a clause is. So we have a clause. It's the part of a sentence, and it has a subject and a verb. Now, there may be several clauses in a sentence. There may be the independent or the main clause, and the main clause is a complete sentence. A complete sentence. Or we may have the independent or the subordinate clause, subordinate clause. This is the other part. And this is an incomplete sentence. Incomplete sentence. Okay, now for example, let's have a look at these sentences. The wizard knows where the giant lives. So in this sentence, the wizard knows. The wizard knows is the main clause. It could be a sentence all by itself. Where the giant lives is our subordinate clause. It's not a complete sentence. This clause needs this clause. But this clause could be a sentence without this clause. So that's the main clause, that's a subordinate clause. An adverb clause is a kind of dependent clause. It can come in front of a main clause or it can come after it. It begins with certain words such as because or after. So if we have our adverb clause, uses words like because, after, and other words. Now, if an adverb clause begins a sentence, then it's followed with a comma. Let's look at some different clauses, some different kinds of adverb clause. Let's start with adverb clauses of time. Have a look at these examples. When the crow cawed, the giant woke up. The fairies came out after the elves went home. So, adverb clauses of time begin with words such as when or after. In the first sentence, the adverb clause is when the crow cawed. So, adverb clause of time. For example, when the crow cawed. This is our adverb clause, not a main clause, adverb clause. It begins with the word when. It's a dependent clause, so it's not a complete sentence. It needs the main clause. And it begins the sentence, so it's followed with a comma. When the crow cawed, the giant woke up. Okay, in the second sentence, after the elves went home, is the adverb clause. After the elves went home. After the elves went home. This is our adverb clause. It begins with the word after. It's a dependent clause, so it's not a complete sentence. But this one comes after the main clause, so there's no comma. When the crow cawed, comma, the giant woke up. And the second one is the fairies came out after the elves went home, so no comma. Let's practice. Let's use some sentences with